What do you get when you combine the American master of fiction and the spookiest family on the planet? Let's find out. While this episode can be enjoyed by all audiences, sensitive young listeners should proceed with caution. Hello, Earthlings and Spacelings. Welcome to a very spooky episode of the Fantaji podcast, your portal into science fiction and fantasy books, and horror you'll probably never read. Whether it was too old, too weird, or you already saw the movie, we'll cover it here. I'm your host, Erika Brickley. Follow, subscribe, like, ring the bell, and share to see more episodes. Tonight, we're lighting the lantern and venturing into a very different kind of story. Halloween was always my favorite holiday growing up. That's not to say I was particularly creative with my costumes or grew up with giant inflatable balloons of Mickey Mouse dressed as Dracula in my front yard, but my family really got into the spirit of the season. We went to the pumpkin farm, we carved jack-o'-lanterns, we put up spider webs and snakes and spiders. My mom was great at sewing, so she really enjoyed making our costumes. Once, we were little fairy godmothers dressed in white dresses that were basically warm flannel nightgowns. It gets really cold Halloween night in rural Iowa. Another year, I was Medusa, having bought an old wig and glued rubber snakes to it. The best costume I ever had was a bat. My mom dressed me all in brown, then put me in a cloak she'd sewed made of fuzzy brown fabric with slits for my hands to stick out of and bat wing scalloped edges. Her goal was always to keep us warm and comfortable, but also to make us look great. The adorable matching bat ears were a definite highlight. To this day, my sister goes all out for Halloween, painting her skin green for a convincing poison ivy costume, or sewing her boyfriend a complete outfit. Halloween night was like an informal get-together. My grandma came over in her sparkly sweater covered in bats and candy corn, and we ate themed foods like mummy wraps, which were basically pigs in a blanket. My mom liked Star Wars a lot, so we had some Star Wars cookbooks that she used for inspiration. In the hours leading up to trick-or-treating, my mom, sister, and I painted our nails black or purple and put on dark eyeshadow. Mom is pretty much always a witch. That's her favorite thing. Meanwhile, my dad worked on his own costume. At some point, he had the brilliant idea to fetch a shovel from the backyard, dress in a suit, and wear a top hat he had bought at Walmart. The hat even had shoulder-length, curly black hair stuck to it. With my dad's black beard, it was pretty convincing. He proudly pronounced himself an undertaker, and we were delighted to have him supervise us around the neighborhood. Trick-or-treating was a blast. Our neighborhood was located near the college and had lots of streetlights and participating houses with the porch lights on. So, lots of families from smaller towns or more remote neighborhoods drove to our neighborhood to trick-or-treat. It was as crowded as what you see in Halloween movies. Masks and wigs and coveralls everywhere, followed by warmly dressed parents. I carried my favorite pumpkin-shaped bucket and did the rounds until I was too tired to keep going. Then my sister and I sat on the couch enjoying some of our favorite candies before bed. We always had lots of stories to tell Mom and Grandma when we returned. The year our doctor dressed as a troll to answer the door for trick-or-treaters was a definite highlight. It helped that the light sconces on his porch were dragon-shaped. Terrifying. Nowadays, I don't do much with Halloween. The last few years, Halloween night has been extremely cold and has been complicated by the pandemic or where I've moved. Still, I dress up when I get the chance. The other year, I dressed as a fluffy white yeti, and my husband put on his lederhosen to be a mountain yodeler, i.e. my victim. Since my sister dressed as Mothman, we made an excellent pair. Black and white, yin and yang, both with splashes of blood red. Yes, I love Halloween. Orange is still my favorite color. I don't care if everyone in high school thought I was repping our football team all the time, the Tigers. Hearing all this, you won't be surprised to know that I love the Addams family. I watched a bit of the cartoon, I loved the Scooby-Doo crossover episode, I had a big book of Chaz Addams comics, I loved the live-action movies. Where are my Christopher Lloyd fans at? As a side note, I also loved the Munsters growing up. We didn't have cable, so my sister and I watched some old rerun channels that played episodes of Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, and The Munsters. Just recently, we watched the Rob Zombie movie based on the old show. It was cute and colorful, but I wanted to see more of the kids. For those who don't know, the Addams Family is a fictional, spooky family based on the work of cartoonist Charles Samuel Addams. He had a wonderfully dark, playful sense of humor that always made me laugh. Medusa turning up at the barber for an impossible trim, beautiful images with hidden tricks and darkness, ridiculous situations. Honestly, I can't really do his work justice. If you like Gary Larson's Far Side cartoons, you'll probably like Chaz Addams. Born 1912 in New Jersey, died 1988 in New York, he was known for his macabre, single-panel comics in The New Yorker. There were some recurring characters in Addams's work, a family of creepy, borderline monstrous people who were, on the one hand, like everybody else, and on the other, very dark and demented. There was a mother and father, a son and daughter, a grandma, an uncle, a butler, and a few others who popped up, like furry cousin It. Addams named the characters when it came time to make a cartoon about them, thus solidifying the household. Again, I'm not sure I can describe the Addams Family in any detail without spending the entire episode on it. The original cartoons are not quite as innocent as, say, Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School, but the dark edge of the humor mostly came from how hilarious it was that this family reacted to everything in completely the opposite way that normal people would. Hurricane outside? What lovely weather. Thanksgiving is here? Let's roast a two-headed hog. Christmas? Pull out the octopus, Iron Lady, and guillotine decorations. I highly recommend the live-action films from the 90s if you want to capture the essence of the humor, though I'm sure the Wednesday TV show and the modern Addams Family films have their good points. I haven't really seen those, or the original live-action show from the 60s. There's just something so heartwarming about a family that looks and acts different from everybody else, but basically love each other, care for each other, and spend time together the way any ideal family should. Okay, most people know about the Addams Family, but what about some of Charles Addams's lesser-known works? Well, one of them is the cover of today's book, From the Dust Returned by Ray Bradbury. From the Dust Jacket Returned? Anyway, this is a book that just screams Halloween. I knew it was Addams's work before I caught sight of the signature in the bottom right-hand corner. I wasn't surprised it was Bradbury's work. I was surprised that anyone had been smart enough to unite these two artists' work in a single volume. I'd never heard of it until I stumbled across it at the annual Planned Parenthood book sale in Des Moines. Well, not annual anymore. It's really important that I have a hardback copy of From the Dust Returned because the wraparound dust jacket is a real showstopper. Subtle and monochromatic from a distance, there is so much detail once you start looking. On the front is a gothic wooden mansion reminiscent of where the Addams family lives, complete with widow's walks, spires, steep roofs, and a tower. The house sits on the edge of a dark, shifting lake where dangerous rocks stick up through the surface under stormy clouds. Creepy figures approach the house from every direction. Bats, moths, mice, and octopuses are coming. Various ghouls that float through the sky, horned, striped, a tattered shroud, a human brain with a nervous system. A tornado touches down. A waterspout lifts up into the air. From one direction comes a wolf, a humpbacked witch, a ghost. From the other, a winged demon, a water wraith, a chicken. Fire seeps from a crack in the earth. A badge on the cover says National Book Award, with further text stating Distinguished Contribution to American Letters. On the back, there is a quote from the Washington Post. Almost no one can imagine a time or place without the fiction of Ray Bradbury. His stories and novels are part of the American language. The modern white man's American language, to be clear, but his work stands as a cultural monument. I'll be honest and say that I haven't actually read that much of Bradbury's work. I have read the incredibly important Fahrenheit 451, which my brilliant English teacher, Mr. Bill Rudolph, made sure to spend plenty of time on while I was in high school. He pointed out the social commentary, as well as the imaginative science fiction elements. I have also read about half of the Martian Chronicles, which I talked a little about in a previous episode. Bradbury was inspired by my hometown of Grinnell, Iowa, when he wrote the Martian Chronicles, so I'll finish reading it one of these days out of respect and pride. Other than that, I haven't gotten around to Dandelion Wine, The Illustrated Man, and so on. Let's discover more about Bradbury together. The man's work is legendary at this point. His Wikipedia page is quite extensive. Born 1920 in Illinois, died 2011 in LA, Ray Douglas Bradbury's speculative fiction works did a lot to make science fiction mainstream. He was an avid reader and writer from a young age, drawing inspiration from all the greats: Wells, Verne, Burroughs, Poe, along with Heinlein, Clark, Sturgeon, and Van Vogt. He started a little sci-fi magazine called Futuria Fantasia in 1939. He contributed to other magazines for many years. He worked in theater, and he began writing full-time in his mid-20s, starting with short story anthologies. Apparently, he didn't like to be put into a box in terms of genre, but he personally believed Fahrenheit 451 was science fiction, based on reality, while the rest of his sci-fi-esque work was pure fantasy, like The Martian Chronicles. I'm currently reading Science, Myth, and the Fictional Creation of Alien Worlds by Albert Wendlin, and Bradbury's opinion is well supported. Skimming through the rest of the Wikipedia page, Bradbury was mostly progressive-leaning, an advocate for education, and had the Ray Bradbury Award for Excellence in Screenwriting and the Bradbury Award for Best Script named after him. Apparently there's also a music video by singer Rachel Bloom all about her admiration and sexual attraction to the author. The cover of From the Dust Returned was originally used for the short story Homecoming, the first of the Halloween tales written and published by Mademoiselle magazine in 1946. He didn't finish compiling stories about the family depicted within Homecoming until 2001, which is the book we have now. I think it's cool that Chaz Addams did a cover for Bradbury's work, since the Addams Family cartoons have been around since 1938, nearly a decade before the Homecoming characters. There could have been a whole artist's feud about these similarities, but instead we have this wonderful piece of Halloween fun. Cracking the cover, there are some more cute details, namely spiderwebs on all the otherwise blank pages before the title page. A spider dangles from the title, which in full says, From the Dust Returned, A Family Remembrance. My copy is from William Morrow Publishing. A quick flip-through shows that there are a few simple illustrations inside. A skeleton here, a gargoyle there, a few Egyptian hieroglyphs. They seem like stock images used during printing, so I won't dwell on them, but it is time to dwell on the story. Prologue. The beautiful one is here. The great event, the great night, the homecoming is near. In the attic, 1,000 times great-grandmère awaits, neither alive nor dead, an Egyptian mummy propped up in the corner. She watches Timothy visit her from behind lapis lazuli eyes, and replies when he speaks to her. "Oh, beautiful one."
"Beautiful no longer,"
the mummy says, remembering when she was a pharaoh's daughter in the hot sands of the pyramids. "Grandma, then," Timothy relents. 1,000 times great-grandmère. He has brought her some wine with a BC vintage and sits on a box carved with hieroglyphs once she's had a drink. He wants to know about this house and the ensuing gathering. Grandmère remembers and tells him. Chapter 1. The Town and the Place. Everyone knows where the town came from. People gathered in the grassy place with a hill on their way here and there, and the town arrived. But how does a house arrive? Perhaps the crooked black tree on the hill called it out of weather and time, with roots so deep they touch China. Passerby were captivated by the grand house fit for a queen, and many stayed before they realized it. First came the house, then the legends. Or perhaps a great wind passed through Indiana, Ohio, and Illinois, picking up lumber, which then fell into the shape of a house by the work of unseen hands. Beams and windows and a wrapping porch, housing a maze of rooms haunted by future comings. Chapter 2. Anuba Arrives. The cat came first. Anuba entered, the front door slammed, and she was there. There was a time when she slept at Ramesses' feet with her fellows, only to be woken by Napoleon's men centuries later. They were carried to the States with a shipment of papyrus whose bacteria murdered hundreds of paper workers, while the cats and their Empress Queen walked on. So, Anuba came to the tree and the house, and she curled up in front of the hearth where a fire burned for her. Fires lit themselves in every room after that first arrival. Chapter 3. The High Attic. Grandmère tells Timothy of the sleeper who dreams. She was called to the house and dwells in the upper attic where the wind whistles, her dreams stirring quietly. Chapter 4. The Sleeper and Her Dreams. In the high attic place beneath the shingles, Cece resides. She came second, after the cat, and is the fairest and most special daughter of the family. Lying in the sandy dust of the attic, she sleeps and dreams of the world beyond the house and the hill, of northern snows and Amazon summers. The occupations of strangers 10,000 miles away float to her ears, and she gossips about lives and deaths at mealtimes. A goddess of wisdom, she is a porcelain daughter allowed to sleep all hours as philosophies beyond Plato or Aristotle pass over her lips. And the one desire she has, born of all she hears, is this: I want to be in love. Chapter 5. The Wandering Witch. Invisible, barely a breath on the wind, Cece flies. She piggybacks off the beings of this world. Soft doves, green frogs, barking dogs, dandelion ghosts, singing crickets. Love, she murmurs. Where is my love? She had said as much at supper, and her parents had advised patience.
Remember, you're remarkable,
they said.
Our whole family is odd and remarkable. We must not marry with ordinary folk. We'd lose our dark souls if we did. You wouldn't want to lose your ability to travel by wish and desire, would you? And be careful, careful.
Cece was not patient. She remembered her gifts and used them. Now a pebble, a crocus, a praying mantis. In the same way, perhaps she can be in love through someone else, if she is too old as she is. She finds a young woman outside a farmhouse and places herself into the well to be scooped up and swallowed. Then Cece looks out of the girl's eyes, and the girl gasps with fear. Who's there? And must be comforted. Only the wind, whispers Cece. The hum of this body is warm as a hearth fire, whose name is Anne. You're going to be in love, Cece whispers. Just then, a young man drives up and gets out of his car. His name is Tom, and Anne is not speaking to him right now, but Cece stops her from stomping off. Cece watches him from a great distance and drinks in his face, his shoulders, his shapely skull. She lives in Anne's head as she lived in the second attic of the house, where she is sleeping and dreaming now. When Anne drops the water bucket and Tom wipes her shoes with a handkerchief, Cece makes sure Anne says thank you. Anne wants to rush off, but Cece keeps her there. Tom wants to know if she'll go with him to the dance after all. The thought makes Cece's heart sing. To dance, to be a woman, to rejoice in springtime. Yes, Anne says. I don't know why, but I'll go with you tonight, Tom. Anne gets ready and gets in the car even though she doesn't like Tom. Summer, farewell, dancing, she mutters. In some way, Anne can tell Cece is there, a last of summer witch loaning her body, and Cece has to be vigilant lest Anne fall back into her senses, for on her own she is determined to reject Tom. Cece pours herself into the hands and feet to make sure Anne puts on her coat and hurries out. The dance is like a room full of pigeons and peacocks, and Cece delights in such a fine evening.
You're odd, Tom comments. You're not like the Anne Leary I knew. You're here, Anne, and you're not. Why did you come with me?
I didn't want to, Anne says.
Why then?
Something made me.
What?
I don't know, Anne says, faintly hysterical. They go sit in Tom's car, and he tries to make sense of his confusion. Anne is cold 1 second, then warm. There's something new about Anne, and he's in love with it, as he was once in love with Anne before. With me, Cece says through Anne's lips, but she can't force the girl to say she'll love Tom with all her heart. And when Tom asks if he can kiss her, and Cece says yes, Anne sits like a white statue. I do love you, Cece says. I'm here. It's me you see in her eyes, and I will love you if she never will. As Tom drives Anne home, Cece thinks she'd happily give up everything to be with this earthbound boy forever. Tom, Anne says haltingly, if you're ever, in years to come, at any time, in Greentown, Illinois, a few miles from here, will you do me a favor? Will you do me the favor of stopping and seeing a friend of mine? Tom reluctantly promises, and Cece is at her limit, exhausted. But before she goes, she kisses him once more with Anne's lips. He looks deep into those eyes and seems to relax, accepting whatever it is, before he drives away. Cece lets go and watches through the eyes of a bird as Anne rushes back into the house, freed from prison. She tries to reach out, to feel Tom's mind, but he is asleep. Yet still he holds onto the scrap of paper with the address for a house in Greentown, Illinois, where maybe he will go someday. Chapter 6. Whence Timothy?
And me, Grandmère?
Timothy asks. Did I come in through the high attic window?
You did not come, child. You were found. Left at the door in a basket with Shakespeare for foot prop and Poe's usher as a pillow, with a note pinned to your blouse. Historian. You were sent, child, to write us up, list us in lists, register our flights from the sun, our love of the moon. But the house, in a way, did call you, and your small fists hungered to write.
Chapter 7. The House, the Spider, and the Child. Quote, the house was a puzzle inside an enigma inside a mystery, unquote. It's full of beds, some with lids, and high ceilings. The dining room has 13 chairs, the chandelier sparkles with teardrop crystals, and the basement is full of ancient vintage. There is only one spider, whose webs encompass the entire house. Quote, the house was yearning to be haunted, unquote. It calls to those long dead, inviting them to do something more interesting than lie in their graves. Near All Hallows Eve, someone left a picnic basket by the iron gate. A tall, gaunt couple came outside, accompanied by a witchy grandma, and examined the child within the basket. He was pink as sunrise, and the sounds of his breath and heartbeat are loud to ears not used to hearing such things. The lady of the fogs and marshes holds a mirror to his face to see he has a reflection. Despite the babe's strangeness, she takes him inside. And so, Timothy came to reside in the nursery decorated with the toys of dead pharaohs. His cries echoed into the high attic where Cece slept, and her dreams quieted him, making the dark lady's husband smile. And the single spider came to sit on the boy's hand like a stone ring. Chapter 8. Mouse Far Traveling. There was also a single mouse. Her journey was not so different from that of the cat who once knew ancient Egypt, before crossing the oceans and lands until she reached the house. She arrived at the same time as Timothy, and rattle-scratched her way through the walls. The mouse ended up in the nursery, so that Timothy now lived with, quote, his attendant a rack in one ear, and Mouse on his shoulder, and Anuba on his lap, unquote. At age 10, he waited for the greatest arrival of all. Chapter 9. Homecoming. Sleeping Cece sensed them first, and Timothy is all excitement. They're coming through the air and traveling through the ground in many forms, Cece whispers. Wolves with starlight pelts, maple leaves blowing, small bats flying. Tomorrow night is All Hallows Eve, and everyone is coming. Timothy makes his bed and looks in the only mirror in the house. To have a reflection and such small, unsharpened teeth is an affliction, but he is still excited for the gathering. Still, he is tired, for he struggles to sleep during the day like the rest of the family does. His bed is soft. He has no wings. He is different. Will he be allowed in the party? He can hear Mother and Father downstairs, and Father calls Timothy to the cellar. He has Timothy shine a coffin for 8-foot-tall Uncle Einar. Then he's sent off to collect toadstools. In the coldish, warmish October air, Timothy looks at the other farmhouses and the distant town, and excitedly thinks no one knows what's happening at his house. Father and Mother murmur incantations in the cellar, performing strange blessings as the family members arrive. Cece looks through their eyes one by one. Timothy can feel her gaze through him before she moves on. Timothy wants to be one of them, to run in packs or to sleep underground until the rains wash him out. Mother wants that for him too, so that her boy will live forever. But for now, Grandmère whispers,
"Let it begin."
A great wind whips across the world. Quote, "In tidal sweeps and swoons of sound, it robbed the graves of dust from stone angels' eyes, vacuumed the tombs of spectral flesh, seized funeral flowers with no names, shucked druid trees to toss the leaf harvest high in a dry downpour. A battalion of shorn skins and fiery eyes that burned crazily in oceans of ravening clouds that tore themselves to flags of welcome to pace the occupants of space as they grew in numbers to sound the sky with such melancholy eruptions of lost years that a million farmyard sleepers waked with tears on their faces, wondering if it had rained in the night and no one had foretold. And on the storm river across the sea, which broiled at this gravity of leave-taking and arrival until, with a flurry of leaves and dust commingled, it hovered in circles over the hill and the house and the welcoming party, and Cece above all, who in her attic, a slumberous totem on her sands, beckoned with her mind and breathed permission." Unquote. The windows fly open, and the ancient air streams in. With it comes flying things, crippled shades, and flying devils. The parlor chairs are suddenly filled with aunts and uncles, cousins and long-lost nephews. They shambled, stalked, and flew, alighting on the chandelier or pictures on the walls. Timothy leaves Cece and Grandmère in the attic to run downstairs through the tumult, crying out in delight while Mouse and Spider hide. 1,000 ghouls turn to look at him with burning beast-like eyes. He's seized by the family, and, quote, "He could only watch the carousel of shapes and sizes of mist and fog and smoke faces and legs with hooves," unquote.
"Well, you must be Timothy,"
they say.
"Hands too warm, face and cheeks too hot, brow perspiring. What's this? Is that a small heart? Hammering like an anvil? Poor lad, none of that now, we'll soon stop it."
Mother steps in, and Timothy cowers.
"That was your Uncle Jason,"
she says.
"I don't like him,"
Timothy whispers.
"You're not supposed to like, son. Not supposed to like anyone."
Timothy is told to pass the wine, but he knows it's not really wine, and flees the house in fright. He's stopped by an avalanche of wings as giant Uncle Einar arrives. Einar takes Timothy up into the air, tossing and dropping him.
"Fly, Timothy, fly! Well, well, in time. Think, wish, and with the wishing, make."
They return to the porch, and Uncle Einar and Timothy go inside to where phantoms dance and almost skeletons feast. Suddenly, a rooster cries, and all is still. Ghosts and ghouls slink away to their boxes with brass-labeled lids. Quote, "Uncle Einar, last of all, kettle-drummed the air as he descended, laughing at some half-remembered death, perhaps his own, until he lay in the longest box of all, and let his wings simmer to be tucked on each side of his laughs, and with the last bat-web pinion safely appliqued to chest, shut his eyes, gave a nod, and the lid, so summoned, shut down on his laughs as if he were still in flight and the cellar was all silence and dark." Unquote. Timothy is left alone in the house. Loving the sun but wishing he loved the dark, he goes to Cece's attic and falls asleep beside her in the Egyptian sands. At sunset, dozens of boxes and casks slam open, and pulsating ectoplasm becomes shape. Cousins, nephews, nieces, aunts, and uncles melt into being. The house is once again stormed with people made of storm clouds, wings, and dread, until Timothy is again driven outside in a panic, unable to waltz, drink, or eat the food being devoured. Rather than stand in the rain, he again goes to Cece's attic room. "Where are you tonight?" Timothy asks.
Far west, California, by a salt sea,
near the mud pots and the steam and the quiet. I'm a farmer's wife sitting on a wooden porch. The sun's going down. I'm inside this woman's head, looking out through the little holes in her skull, listening to the silence. Timothy listens to Cece talk about the sulfur mud pits and sleeping dinosaurs, about a house in the twilight shadow of mountains on a dirt road, about the husband who will never come home. Cece leaves the woman as she walks off the porch and into the mud pit. Cece opens her eyes and looks at Timothy. "Why are you upstairs instead of with the homecoming?" she asks. And when Timothy explains and asks for help being like everyone else, she lends a hand. Back downstairs, Timothy is able to drink a full glass of wine while everyone watches. He eats toadstools and jumps off the stairwell, convinced he can fly. However, he cannot, and Uncle Einar catches him. "This is Cece!" Timothy's voice cries. "Cece, come see, in the attic!" While everyone rushes upstairs, Timothy again flees the house, hiding in the barn. "Cece, I hate you, he sobs. But he is not alone. The spider entertains him, the mouse snuggles warm in his shirt pocket, and the cat curls up beside him. When he's feeling better, Timothy ventures out and is caught by Uncle Einar.
Cheer up, nephew. How much richer things are for you. Our world is dead, all tombstone gray. Life's best to those who live least, worth more per ounce.
Together, they bring 1,000 times great-grandmère down from her attic to oversee the dining table and enjoy sips of wine. The family plays games, mirror games, musical coffins. Timothy almost wins against his fey cousin Rob. The family talks of relatives not here, of those still wandering. And then the clock strikes 6. The homecoming is done. The family sings songs that are centuries old, embracing each other. Timothy sings too and forgives Cece, since he finally enjoyed the gathering. When the song is done, mother and father stand happy at the door, kissing their relatives goodbye as they leave hastily before the sun rises. With Cece's help, Timothy experiences some of it. An ancient leathery cousin kissing the dark lady's hand. Cousin William, swift as smoke with red eyes and padded feet. Uncle Einar picking up Timothy himself to say farewell. He experiences everyone laugh and weep as they return to a world that is modernizing, no longer fit for them. The next gathering will be in Salem. Mother shuts the door as the last of the wings, leaves, scarves sweep themselves out. In their absence, Timothy feels small and mortal, and Mother comforts him.
Timothy, son, we all love you, no matter how different you are, no matter if you leave us one day. And if and when you die, your bones will lie undisturbed. We'll see to that, and you'll lie at ease forever, and I'll come see you every All Hallows Eve and tuck you in more secure.
Timothy goes up to his room, crying all the way. Chapter 10. West of October. Cousins Peter, William, Philip, and Jack linger after the homecoming, unsure about returning home to Europe when doom grows. So they stay in the barn, only for it to burn down. Quote, "To say that most of them slept days and worked at odd occupations nights would fall short of commencement. To remark that some of them could read minds, and some fly with lightnings to land with leaves, would be an understatement. To add that some could not be seen in mirrors, while others could be found in multitudinous shapes, sizes, and textures in the same glass would merely repeat gossip that veered into truth." Unquote. All 4 were in love with Cece. Quote, "Ask her to yank your soul like an aching tooth, and shoot it into clouds to cool your spirit. And yanked you were, drawn high to drift in the mists." Unquote. She was everything all at once, and could take others along for the picture show. Cece smiles as they plead, and takes them up out of their bodies to visit the insane asylum. And while they're away from their bodies asleep in the barn burns. Quote, "All 4, at the moment of concussion, had been in various asylum bins, prying trapdoor skulls to peek in at maelstroms of confetti the colors of madness, the dark rainbows of nightmare." Unquote. Suddenly, Cece has permanent company, 4 undead souls with no bodies to return to. Peter, William, Philip, and Jack look out of her eyes. She cries out with dismay, and so do the cousins stuck like pebbles under her tongue. father thinks about what to do. The boys must be found temporary homes until new bodies can be culled. 1,000 times great-grandmère nominates her husband, 1,000 times great-grandpère. He objects, but she points out that he has all the time in the world. And so, the four spirits hop from Cece to grandpère's cerebellum. All at once they are wild in his face, and the brittle, dry man leaves the house to shamble down the road. The family has to retrieve him in the coach. Now, Father's plan is to take the ancient Nile grandparent to Sojourn, Missouri, a town west of Greentown and October, Illinois, where they have more relatives. Cece's mind cannot reach so far, so grandpère must hold strong during the journey. He is put on a train and suffers through the cousin's constant chatter in the tomb of his skull. Before the train takes them too far away, Cece tells them to look about and appreciate the bright memories of Egypt around them. Later, the boys want to look at a pretty girl on the train, but grandpère does his best to keep his eyes shut to maintain Cece's innocence. However, Cece is not innocent and tells of all the things she has seen in her travels. Such passionate life stories kindle something in grandpère, and his mummy body blushes with new life. The cousins take control of the body, this one moving a leg, that one moving an arm, and try to go say hello to the woman they saw. Unfortunately, they nearly fling grandpère off the train in the process. They stumble into the woman, and grandpère decides to drop the four down a trap door in his mind of memories. Peter, William, Philip, and Jack are startled to see pictures of many lovely women over the centuries. When Jack tries to catch one, the beautiful face withers to reveal grandmère's mummified cheeks, for this is how she was 4,000 years ago. Jack is sent to sit in a robin outside the train. The woman is still there in the other seat, and Cece considers a brilliant, wicked plan to bring her mind into grandpère's for an acrobatic romp through memories. But grandpère pulls the curtains down.
Continuing by innocence,
grandpère says to the woman, then goes to sleep. It turns out no members of the family were willing to take the four cousins, so back to Illinois grandpère went. They were forced to remain in the moonlit corners of grandpère's mind, each with their choice of memory companion. And sometimes grandpère asked grandmère for a dance, but she always says no, not at their age. Chapter 11. Many Returns. As the world turns and changes, many family members return to the house in a flurry to hide away. They are welcomed, all with stories like that of one lost soul traveling by train in Europe. Chapter 12. On the Orient North. Riding the Orient Express from Venice to Paris is a man clearly dying of some dread disease. He only comes out of his compartment at twilight to sit quietly in the dining car, where a Miss Minerva Halliday spots him. She watches the skeletal figure, nearly toppling over any time the train goes around a curve. Though she gives him a kind word, she hurries away. Not long after, train staff are in search of a doctor, and, being a nurse, Miss Minerva Halliday accompanies them to the compartment where the ghastly man was carried. She's sure he's dead, and yet, she somehow knows what he is sick of. The man's affliction is people. Everyone on this train. That is what is killing him. People who don't rest and listen. People who are loud tourists. "I am a special nurse with a special memory," she says when he looks at her and asks, "I met someone like you when I was 6. She describes seeing a cold shadow of a man at her uncle's home in Ireland. "You are not sick, and you are not dying. You are a ghost."
"Yes,"
he cries. The ghastly man is not going to Paris, but to London beyond, then maybe to a castle in Edinburgh. And the old nurse decides she will go with him to make sure he reaches his ultimate destination. She is English, and the English believe in things like ghosts on the moors and the Baskerville Hound. With the nurse by his side, the ghost tells of his life. 200 years near Vienna spent hiding in dusty library stacks, dining on myths and mound-yard tales. His unseen compatriots have disappeared, one by one, as castles tumble and women's clubs take over haunted gardens.
Evicted, we ghastly wanderers of the world have sunk in tar, bog, and fields of disbelief, doubt, scorn, or outright derision.
All his friends have fled. Now he is a nameless specter in search of a place, the letters on the gravestone long since erased by mist, water, and sun. Then it's the old nurse's turn. My life was that of a stuffed owl. I was not a nun, yet never married. Treating an invalid mother and a half-blind father, I gave myself to hospitals, tombstone beds, cries at night, and medicines that are not perfume to passing men. So, I am something of a ghost myself, yes? And now, tonight, 66 years on, I have at last found in you a patient. Magnificently different, fresh, absolutely new. She thinks of the fleeting man as a lark like she has never had. They reach Paris, and Minerva Halliday bustles the ancient man off the train onto the platform. They take a cab to the cemetery, where they settle for a picnic atop the grave of a writer who loved nights, fogs, and castles. The pair board another train, and the pale passenger withstands the barrage of young people's chatter. Minerva Halliday searches through her books to find some source of relief for her friend. Hamlet, A Christmas Carol, Wuthering Heights, The Turn of the Screw, Rebecca, The Monkey's Paw. She reads aloud, finishing with The Telltale Heart, and that finally gets the Orient ghost's heart beating again. At last they reach the sea, shrouded in mist and fog and rain like tears. The wintry soul is waved through customs onto the ferry. In a moment of insight, Minerva Halliday takes her patient to the playroom of the ship to tell ghost stories. "You do believe in ghosts, yes?" she asks the children, and they agree. And the pale man rouses himself to tell them a truly frightful tale as the children crowd in close. Nurse Halliday looks out at the sea cliffs where the dark safety of castles and attics await. When the parents come to collect their children, the sight of the Orient gentleman sends shivers down their spines. The ghost walks himself off the ferry when it arrives in England. He runs towards the train that will take him deeper into this country that believes, and is slow to realize that Minerva looks different as she follows. Behind him is a woman collapsed while people call for a doctor, lying beside a broken medical thermometer, and beside him is a specter coming with him. Together, they will be larks.
I wonder who she was.
The ghastly passenger says, looking back at the dock as the train pulls away. I never really knew, the old nurse says. Chapter 13. Nostrum Paracelsius Crook. Nostrum PC had arrived for the homecoming, and now refused to leave the barn. He had a crooked back, a crooked mouth, and crooked eyes. He won't go back to the poisoned woods of Europe, to the east where no more birds sing. The specters of that continent move westward, hoping to hop the channel into England where the last castles and superstitions stand. Nostrum PC proposes that the family find a name for themselves after all this time. Just then, the ghastly passenger from the Orient Express arrives at the house. He survived the journey across the world to October Country in Upper Illinois, through England, Scotland, Connecticut, and beyond. Dead Minerva Halliday is with him.
Are you one of us?
The family asks.
Am I one of you, or with you? And what are you, or we, or us? Can it be named? Is there a shape? What ambiance is there? Are we kin to autumn rains? Do we rise in mists from wetland moors? Do twilight fogs seem familiar? Do we prowl or run or lope? Are we shadows on a ruined wall? Are we dusts shaken and sneezes from angel tombstones with broken wings? Do we hover or fly or writhe in October ectoplasms? Are we footsteps heard to waken us and bump our skulls on nailed shut lids? Are we batwing heartbeats held in claw or hand or teeth? Do our cousins weave and spell their lives like that creature lassoed to the boy child's neck? Are we the mirror glimpses unseen but there? Do we abide in walls as mortuary beetles telling time? Is the drafting breath upsucked in chimneys our terrible respiration? When clouds curdle the moon, are we such clouds? When rainspouts speak from the gargoyles' mouths, are we those tongueless sounds? Do we sleep by day and swarm glide the splendid night? When autumn leaves shower bullions, are we that Midas stuff? A leaf fall that sounds the air in crisp syllables? What, oh what are we? And who are you, and I, and all surrounding gasps of dead but undead cries? Ask not for whom the funeral bell tolls. It tolls for thee and me and all the ghastly terribles who nameless wander in a marly death of chains. Do I speak the truth?
And so the ghastly passenger and his wondrous nurse are invited in. Chapter 14. The October People. The time has come for the October People and the Autumn Council to decide who and what they are, though the homecoming is over. The easiest question, who is the oldest? 1,000 times great-grandmère.
How many of us are table knockers? How many walkers, shamblers, lopers? How many take the sun? How many shadow the moon? How many branches of the family are death-related? We need a moonless night resume from all. With this knowledge, we can stand together when this mindless war reaches its peak.
War? Timothy gasps. What war? His father explains.
Moses did not walk down the mountain, for he never walked up. Christ did not die, for he was never born. All this, mind you, is of great importance to us, for we are the reverse side of the coin tossed in the air to fall heads or tails. Does the unholy or holy win? But it is not as simple as angels and demons, for much of humanity believes in nothing, neither above nor below. There is no room for either glorious or terrible. We are in danger too, trapped in the tomb with an uncrucified carpenter, blown away with the burning bush as the East's black cubicle cracks its mortar and falls. There is no enemy. It is a figment war. People pretend and assure each other that there are no ghosts or ghouls. One more wave of disbelief in everything, and the family will blow away on the wind.
Mother encourages the family to think about what must be done now, for they know what the problem is, though it is complicated by the fact that too much belief in them will bring an angry mob to their door. So, Timothy suggests that the family spread out. When everyone turns to listen, he nervously explains. Many of the dark forces have settled in one house, one town. Cece can help find empty bottles and lives for homeless spirits, and perhaps teach others to sleep and dream and travel more safely with just a part of themselves. Uncle Einar is the first to volunteer. Chapter 15. Uncle Einar. After visiting farm after empty farm, Uncle Einar is not sure how he likes what he's agreed to. In a fit of displeasure, he gets drunk and flies when he shouldn't, until he's hit by lightning and drops like an enormous phone book. He wakes to the first light of dawn and crawls into the forest. That is how a young Brunilla Wexley found him, exactly the man Cece told her she would one day find. She stays to talk to the winged man, and Einar learns that Brunilla is an astrologer, more jealous of his many wings than frightened. She walked him to her home to treat his lightning burn, and he stayed when he promptly crashed into a tree while leaving. The lightning nearly blinded Einar, and he can no longer fly nights at all, nor in the danger of the daytime. So, rather than figure out a way back to Europe, he and Brunilla are married. After a wedding night in the clouds, she is his world now. But at the same time, he is a very big man to get used to normal family life, and stubborn when Brunilla asks him to fly the laundry line high in the air before the rains come. He must avoid knocking over china, and chairs must be adjusted. And his night vision has never returned. Is he stuck here with a wife and her children, never to drop from the top of Mount Everest again? The children coax Einar out of his brooding with handmade kites, and suddenly he realizes what he must do. He must tie a kite tail to his belt and fly very, very high, while the children unwind the twine. At the kite festival, everyone is in awe at how high the siblings' humming, thundering kite has flown. Chapter 16. The Whisperers. There are many to find homes for. Some have flesh, others are more air, cloud, or wind. They must all be stashed in wine cellars and attics, or turned into statues. They whisper their need, and Cece whispers back.
They say not yes to us, the grand army of the fearsome resurrected, but no, the terrible no, which makes the bat drop wingless and the wolf lie crippled, and all coffins rise with ice and nailed with eternity's frost, from which no family breath can suspire to roam the weather and vapors and mist. Stay in the great house, sleep with telltale hearts which drum the timbered floor. Hide, wait.
Chapter 17. The Theban Voice. The first door hinge in the world was at Thebes, so worshippers of Isis, Osiris, Bubastis, or Ra could enter easily. But the hinge creaked, and its voice was that of the gods, and now it has come to the house. A tribesman of the talkers with no wind, no need of air, the self-sufficient speakers of the night at noon. Timothy writes it down. The small voice that asks of the dead who arrive for admission at the gate of paradise. In your life, did you know enthusiasm? If the answer is yes, you enter the sky. If no, you fall to burn in the pit.
Got this void in my chest that won't go away. It's time for
Chapter 18. Make haste to live. Amongst the grave markers behind the house, where tribute is paid to witches and children who suffered on their way back to the earth, lies Angelina Marguerite, and soon she will be born. Timothy is sent with Arak, Mouse, and Anuba to stand watch. Heartbeat tremors begin and grow stronger until, at 3 a.m, a procession of candles goes to the graveyard. Everyone brings a shovel, and they dig up the golden case. Though Timothy is unnerved by the way the family laughs at the dead reborn, he does not run away. Angelina Marguerite is lovely like a doll in a crate, and Timothy is instructed by mother and father to let go of all his misgivings. Dead or alive, dying or being born, aging into the grave or aging backwards, he must accept. Never doubt, simply be. Make haste to live is the motto everyone must live by, especially Timothy, and, even more so, for Angelina Marguerite. He is a boy, and she is a young woman getting younger. In a short while, she drifts backwards from 19 to 18, and she knows soon enough she will be 16, 15, 14, 13. She tries to explain, but Timothy is only 10 and has yet to live through the events she will soon forget. Perhaps they will be friends and peers in passing. She gives him a kiss, and Timothy understands a little more what he will miss when Angelina Marguerite is gone. She must go away, keep moving, until she regresses all the way to some womb, where eventually she will be a seed that sprouts once more. Aren't I fortunate to be born from the grave, then buried in some child bride's pomegranate maze? She kisses him once more, and Angelina Marguerite leaves, and rumors make their way back to the house of a young girl, 16, 15, 12, making her way to France. Angelina means like an angel, yes? Timothy says over dinner. And Marguerite is a flower? Well then, flowers and angels. Not ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Angels and flowers. And they drink to that. Chapter 19. The Chimney Sweeps. They do more than sweep the chimneys. They occupy them, roar down and waft up. They travel in the clouds, and come down to the house with perhaps 99 or 100 chimneys. In and out without rhythm. They are like cats who got their start in the Outer Hebrides, or in the China Sea, or across the Gulf. Quote, 99, perhaps 100 kindred spells of weather on the move, a tribe of temperatures, the ancient airs. The recent blows of hot and cold that, seeking, found good lodging where thus hidden they waited for a rain-soaked wind to cork them out to join carousels of fresh storm. Unquote. Chapter 20. The Traveler. Father wonders if Cece does anything useful, asleep in her riverbed sands in the attic, but Mother assures him that every member of the family does what they must, in whatever way they can.
All wild. That's how the family goes. Sometimes like Cece, all mind. Then there's Uncle Einar, all wing. And then there's Timothy, all calm and worldly normal. You, sleeping days, and me, awake all and all of my life.
In her attic, Cece briefly wakes to the reality of her sands, and lays back in her hair to slip back into dream-filled sleep. Her mind flies through the minds of others, living as them for brief moments. Quote, "She traveled. Her mind slipped over the flowered yard, the fields, the green hills, over the ancient drowsy streets of town, into the wind and past the moist depression of the ravine. All day she would fly and meander. Her mind would pop into dogs to sit, all bristles, and taste ripe bones. Sniff tangy urined trees to hear as dogs hear, run as dogs run, all smiles. It was more than telepathy. Up one flew, and down another. It was entry to lazing cats, old lemony maids, hopscotch girls, lovers on morning beds, then unborn babes, pink, dream small brains. Where would she go today? She decided. She went. At this very instant, there burst into the silent house below a fury of madness. A man, a crazed uncle of such reputation as would cause all in the family to start and pull back in their own midnights. An uncle from the times of the Transylvanian Wars, and a crazed lord of a dreadful manner who impaled his enemies on spikes, thrust into their bowels to leave them suspended, thrashing in horrible deaths. This uncle, John the Unjust, had arrived from dark Lower Europe some months past, only to discover there was no room for his decayed persona and his dreadful past. The family was strange, perhaps outre, in some degree rococo, but not a scourge, a disease, an annihilation such as he represented with crimson eye, razored teeth, taloned claw, and the voice of a million impaled souls." Unquote. John the Terrible shoves Timothy and his mother out of the way, the only two people awake in the house at noon, and finds Cece in her attic sands. But she is already away, possibly for days.
Call her back. I need her.
Mother tells him all the places Cece might be, but no one can know where she is.
Why do you need her?
Something inside.
He leans over the sleeping body.
Cece, come back. You can if you want.
Mother will not stand for John's behavior, nor will the family. He has done too much, spread too many terrible rumors that might bring the townspeople down upon them. His deeds are not just bumps in the night. He drank and talked too much and made the winds blow the wrong way around the roofs. Now, holy bells are chiming in his head, and he needs Cece to clear them away. He threatens everyone if Cece is not back by tonight. John the Terrible, the Unjust, goes walking across the country in search of the wanderer. He is angry and afraid. He sees Cece in everything. Children, birds. She could be in the asylum for all he knows. A crow flies at him, and John crushes it in his hands.
Cece, I'll kill you if you don't help.
He feels crazy trying to think of what crayfish, squirrel, or any other creature she could be lurking in. John cries by the creek, then walks himself to town and into the police station.
I am here to report a family.
He begins to tell the officer of the family of sin and wickedness, when the chiming bells in his mind explode with sound.
Your voice, my God, your voice, it's her voice. She's behind your eyes, back of your face, on your tongue.
As John flees the station, the officer looks around and wonders if someone said something, and the terrible man returns to the house attic.
The bells, they're yours. I should have known. Hurting me, punishing me. Stop. We'll burn you. I'll bring the mob. Oh, God, my head. My head.
And the man crams his fists into his ears and drops dead. Timothy and his mother watch while the mouse, spider, and cat panic and hide. And Cece wakes up enough to worry that she was too late. Will the police officer remember the name or the house? Chapter 21. Return to the Dust. Timothy wakes from nightmares to realize that Queen Neff, 1,000 times great-grandmère, is calling him. He makes his way to the attic, past the accumulated family junk and finds her weak, a crumbling mummy. Her crystal eyes peek out from behind sewn-shut lids, and she tells him tonight is the end. She shows him the hieroglyphs painted across the bandages of her chest, depictions of their many family members. There is Uncle Einar, Cece, invisible cousin Ron, and all the others Timothy can name. It is the maelstrom of darkness, this house, and it cannot survive the age of discovery and revelations. A lapis lazuli pendant of the house, and the house itself shakes. Grandmère explains that they have until midnight, when people will come with torches, and Cece is with them now, spreading the word that all must flee on the winds. She looks through Timothy's eyes and listens with his ears to Grandmère Neff, the ancient accumulation of the knowledge of death. Only the dead can remember death, while the living are blind, and the living fear what would otherwise be a simple burden.
We are the keepers of time. You who walk the earth know only the moment, which is whisked away with your next exhalation. Because you move and live, you cannot keep. We are the granaries of dark remembrance.
Nothing stays, all goes, Cece whispers. The pendant at Grandmère's breast bursts into sparks and insects while the family flees, and soon Timothy can see the mob outside like a creeping lava flow. Inside the house, there is frantic movement. Cece returns to her body to run across the grass while the chimneys moan, the shingles fall, and the rooms are emptied. Grandmère confronts Timothy as they reach their final hour in the house.
Do you still want to be like us?
When he hesitates, she pushes again.
Speak up. I know your thoughts, but you must speak them.
No, I don't want to be like you.
Is this the beginning of wisdom?
Timothy, though young, has realized that even the ancient, ageless people of the night do not really benefit from all their long years, and even they will fall to dust one day, as he must. The family lives long, remembers much, and knows too much, yet happiness is scarce.
Time is a burden,
Grandmère admits.
The best thing to do, Timothy, in your new wisdom is to live your life to the fullest. Enjoy every moment and lay yourself down many years from now, happily realizing that you've filled every moment, every hour, every year of your life, and that you are much loved by the family.
Now, it is time to run. Timothy carries Grandmère, a parcel of dream and bones, and flees like the rest. Behind them, the house burns, then drowns in a downpour that sends the mob home, leaving behind the skeleton of walls and rafters. The family scattered to faraway hamlets, forests, and farms, though Cece remains near as a compass to all. Mother and father called farewell, and Timothy knew that he may see them again someday. With the dried roll of newspapers that is Grandmère, Timothy hitches a ride away. Chapter 22. The One Who Remembers. For a long time, the house stands empty on the hill. Then a young man comes walking up to it. A voice on the wind draws him inside as the door creaks open. He is Tom, the boy from not so long ago, but he doesn't really understand what he's doing here, who he's looking for. The house beckons him inside to wait and to climb. Up the stairs, quote, "In the attic heights there was a dream inside of a slumber inside of a flesh," unquote. He knows her name, Cece, and the front door slowly closes. Chapter 23. The Gift. A boy shows up at the office of Dwight William Alcott, stating that he is a brilliant boy who bears an ancient treasure. Intrigued, Alcott welcomes the boy in and provides the requested 2 chairs, across which Timothy places 1,000 times great-grandmère. And though he tries to keep up some hint at a conversation, as the curator of a museum, Alcott cannot help himself from standing and getting a closer look. Timothy explains what he has brought, that it was not found, but that it found him. They are family. She is Neff, the mother of Nefertiti, with sewn-shut eyes and dust on her lips beneath ancient bandages. The boy is not trying to sell her, much to the curator's surprise.
What do you want, then?
Just that if she stays here, sir, that once a day, you talk to her. More than that, listen to her. She will tell him about the 4,400 years of her ancient existence, about the 900 million people who had to die so they can live. It is a sad, joyful thing, for it allows Timothy and Alcott to live their lives right now. Neff is the one who remembers. Timothy has Alcott come close to listen. No, closer. Listen. The end. It's time for our favorite game. Did the cover artist read the book? Well, Bradbury all but confirms that Charles Addams probably did read something from Homecoming in order to paint the 2-page spread depicting the house that became this book's cover, which Bradbury describes in the afterword as his October house. Apparently, there had been plans for Bradbury and Addams to work together on a whole collection of stories, with one writing and one illustrating, since they were both producing complementary macabre media. However, Bradbury also says that it can take anywhere from 9 days to 51 years to put an idea to paper. The first draft of Fahrenheit 451 took him 9 days to scribble down, while the October Country Tales were started while he was in his 20s, writing for Weird Tales magazine, and weren't finished until 2000, when he was 80, and Addams had already passed away. I'm only 30 myself, but I find this to be a pretty relatable problem. Even though it took him a long time to complete the collection, it's clear that these spooky stories meant something to Bradbury. He loved Poe and Dickens and similar ghost writers. And he was born in Waukegan, Illinois, where people love Halloween and later served as a model for the fictional village of Greentown. While there is darkness in these stories, they seem like Bradbury's version of Peter Pan. There is great adventure in living and dying, and you need to believe in fairies for them to be real. Even the way the book touches on different parts of the world kind of reminds me of Neverland, where there are pirates at sea, lost boys in the jungle, Native Americans in their camp, and mermaids on the coast. And of course, there's a touch of exoticism surrounding the stereotypical Egyptian elements with mystery and mysticism. But Erika, I thought you didn't like short story collections. Well, you're right, but I thought this was a good opportunity to read a lesser-known Bradbury for the podcast, as well as celebrate Halloween. Back when I wrote it originally. I mean, look at that cover! The king of Halloween cartoons himself painted that. Of course, I know now that this episode wasn't released in time for Halloween because I got caught up in my life outside the podcast. Then I'd planned to finish it in time for the winter holidays, because Christmas is the second best time for creepy content, right? Where are my Nightmare Before Christmas fanatics? That's a movie you can watch during either season and be satisfied. That, and maybe Jim Carrey's How the Grinch Stole Christmas, if only for the costumes. But here we are in June. Though Bradbury started from The Dust Returned as a bunch of short stories, the truth is that they're all so brief and so integral that they really just read as chapters. And there is something of a story that spans the entire set. We have a semi-central character in young Timothy, who is at once loved by his adoptive family and exposed to the creatures of the night, ones who would eat or seduce him. He starts out feeling incredibly lonely because he is different from everybody else, despite having loving parents, 3 animal friends, and Cece for a stepsister. Over time, he begins to understand that life has other things in store for him besides dying and becoming one of the night hordes. Excited as he was for the homecoming, it was frightening to be passed around rooms full of monstrous folk. And witnessing Angelina Marguerite's birth from the grave was disturbing and beautiful all at once, making it clear that the line between life and death is blurred. Everyone exists in the same world. Simultaneously, the people of darkness feel change on the wind. There are fewer suspicious people out there to believe in them, just as there are fewer religious folks. Timothy is involved with cataloging the family members as Cece helps them relocate and spread out, lest they be wiped out. And in the final moments of the house, he must flee like any other family member. While presenting 1,000 times great-grandmère to the museum curator, he is clear about the fact that they are family, and knows he is an unusual little boy. But he also knows that he must live his human life while occasionally visiting grandmère. In the early chapters, it was suggested that he would do something like what Bradbury has done, which is write about the family. From a crying child in the house to a storyteller out in the big wide world, Timothy grows up a little bit. What did you think about the family? They aren't as well defined as the Munsters or the Addamses, but they are interesting. Overall, I'd say the world building is a lot like the Addams family, but with less absurdist humor. There's rarely any humor that I could compare to the Munsters. For those who haven't seen The Munsters, it's a sitcom about a family of monsters who live in a big scary house in the middle of middle-class American suburbia. There's the dad, Herman, who's basically Frankenstein's monster. He's a giant with huge boots, bolts on his neck, and stitches. Then there's the mom, Lily, who's a vampire with a white streak in her long black hair, appropriately similar to the Bride of Frankenstein. They live with their son Eddie, a werewolf boy, and Lily's father, Grandpa, an ancient vampire and mad scientist with a bit of a Mel Brooks thing going on, who's followed around by Igor, his pet bat. Additionally, Herman's niece Marilyn is staying with them. Marilyn is the black sheep of the family because she's blonde and pretty, while everyone else is basically undead. She's perfectly at home in the creepy old house, but wishes she fit in better. When men reject her, Marilyn doesn't realize it's because they are scared off by her family, not because she's repulsive. Herman and Lily love her dearly and always do their best to support their ugly niece. In classic sitcom fashion, this issue is never dealt with on any serious level. Marilyn accepts that she is ugly, just as the family accept that they are wildly better looking than their neighbors. I love catching old black and white reruns on TV along with Bewitched. Timothy, in From the Dust Returned, is the same age as Eddie, but a lot like Marilyn, though he doesn't live in a goofy sitcom with a super catchy theme song, be it the Munsters or the Addams family. Killers and monsters aren't just throwaway jokes. He's confronted with the reality of them all the time. Cousin Jason threatens his life. Their family is drinking wine that might very well be blood. His adoptive mother plans to visit his grave upon his death. His path to self-love is a long one, given that he struggles to always love the family he grew up with. As for the Addams family, who have featured in cartoons, animated shows, sitcoms, films, animated films, and more TV shows, I also grew up with them. Mainly my family watched the 90s movies, which are so darn good. And I had a big book of Chaz Addams newspaper comics. There are the parents, Gomez and Morticia, with their classic outfits, him in a pinstripe suit and her in slinky black that melts into the floor. There are the kids, Wednesday and Pugsley, though their personalities are flipped between the comics and the movie. Originally, Wednesday was smiley, while Pugsley looked like a gremlin. But in the 90s adaptations, they gave Christina Ricci the dark looks and Jimmy Workman the smiles. It works either way. The family also includes Granny in the kitchen, Lurch the Frankenstein butler, Thing the disembodied hand, Cousin It, the ball of hair, and other strange people who show up in the background. Once again, the family lives in a big gothic house and don't really care what their neighbors do. There are a lot of similarities between the family structures of the Munsters and the Addams, but they are very much different stories. I would say that the Munsters are modeled more closely after Hollywood movie monsters, while the Addamses are just generally spooky. And this is true for Bradbury's From the Dust Returned as well, because you can draw some parallels, but the overall tone is, again, different. The family in the October House are more like the monsters in The Nightmare Before Christmas, because some fit a type, like a witch, while others are just winged creatures who fly across the moon or monsters that live in your chimney. The vibe is more important than the lore. And Bradbury's creatures are more ancient, too. The Munsters and the Addamses live normal lives with a twist, while Bradbury's family is made up of winds, mummies, and other undead beings who do care what their neighbors think of them. If the neighbors think too much, they come with torches and fire. The biggest indicator that From the Dust Returned was a series of stories written over the course of half a century is that the characters sometimes come and go, or gain new abilities or features. But that kind of adds to the spooky atmosphere. For example, an old woman who reminds me of the Addams granny is mentioned in an early chapter, then never again. There are the parents, the sleepless dark lady, and her tall, gaunt husband who sleeps in a coffin. There are closer family members, such as Cece the Wandering Witch, winged Uncle Einar, and others like Angelina Marguerite, Nostrum Paracelsius Crook, cousins Peter, William, Philip, and Jack, and various travelers. Instead of Lurch the butler, Thing the hand, or Igor the bat, Timothy has a spider, a mouse, and a cat as companions. I think John the Unjust and Terrible, who seems to be Dracula after several centuries, is a particularly interesting member of the family with a capital F. He proves 2 points that Bradbury slowly introduces to the reader. 1, the family is vulnerable because belief in things that go bump in the night is waning. And 2, it's not good for people to believe in them too much. Their safe existence relies on the presence of both suspicions and doubt. John the Terrible committed real-world crimes that resulted in him being ousted from the family, and he comes back because Cece planted chiming church bells in his head to try and distract him, as far as I can tell. John's actions brought too much attention to the dark folk, stoked too much fear, left too much evidence. He is hurt by their rejection, but it was inevitable. They know he is a liar with no care for others. And in threatening Cece and the family with telling the police about the house full of dark things if Cece does not come back and lift the bell curse from his mind, he proves again why he is not really family. Though Cece swoops in to do what she can, and John takes himself out, the policeman seems to have remembered what was said, and a mob sets fire to the house. He wasn't alive, or undead, to see it, but this sort of behavior completely justifies the family in not wanting him around. My favorite character in the book is probably Uncle Einar. Not only does he show a bit of kindness to Timothy, he's a giant with a bunch of wings. So cool. Not much to say other than that I enjoyed the chapters he appeared in. If you enjoyed Einar's wings, and like the mysterious, whimsical nature of From the Dust Returned and other characters like Cece, I would recommend you read The Dark Angel Trilogy by Meredith Ann Pierce. The series takes place in a fantasy world that reminds me of The Neverending Story, Labyrinth, Lord of the Rings, Last Unicorn, Earthsea. I really loved the covers for the first book, and the story went in so many weird places I wasn't expecting. That's a book for people who love stories that combine classic fairy tales with new ideas. The subject matter in From the Dust Returned also reminds me of a young adult novel I started years ago called A Certain Slant of Light by Laura Whitcomb that covers ghosts hopping into empty or partially empty bodies. And there are definite similarities to The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. My one main criticism for From the Dust Returned would be that it falls into the usual gender traps. All the female characters are very predictable side personalities. Maybe with the slight exception of Cece or Grandmère. Timothy's mother is caring and protective. The wandering witch Cece is lovely and loved by many men and falls in love. Angelina Marguerite is beautiful like a doll and gives Timothy his first kiss. Brunilla is a sweet yet nagging wife for Einar, caring for kids and doing laundry. Minerva Halliday is a dedicated caregiver. I don't know, it might be unfair for me to criticize female characters who aren't poorly written. I think I just get tired of seeing them always doing the same sort of thing. Wives, mothers, love interests, nurses. Their appearance is described in much greater detail than any of the men, and the scenes with Angelina Marguerite kissing 10-year-old Timothy are uncomfortable, despite how wonderfully written they are. Bradbury did a great job of describing what it's like to have an earth-shattering kiss. But this falls into a realm of media that treats early romantic experiences as a rite of passage for men where they would be predatory for girls. I'll leave a link to the Pop Culture Detective video I'm specifically thinking of here in the YouTube description box. I know I link him a lot, but he's very well spoken on these topics. On to lighter topics. Other than the Addams Family, Addams Family Values, and The Nightmare Before Christmas, what Halloween movies do I like to watch? Well, my family's favorite has always been Practical Magic. It's a movie that seems not to get much attention, except from people who admire the actors or the costuming. There are moments that ride the line between scary and goofy, which probably contributed to some people not liking it, but I think they add to its Halloween quality. Witches, curses, resurrection, islands, old houses, cowboy detectives, spells, toads. It's really good. I also watched It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown a lot when I was young, as well as Hocus Pocus and Halloween Town. I always thought I would be so mad if my mom didn't tell me I might have magical powers. My sister and I have a lot of funny stories about Halloween movies. The Little Vampire wasn't too scary, probably because we watched it so much, nor were kooky films like The Witches, Matilda, A Simple Wish. They were the same way. What were scary were the movies we watched on our own. While my family was in Washington, D.C. for a reunion, my parents went to dinner with the other adults and left my sister and me to pick a pay-per-view movie on the TV. I was like 11, and we didn't have phones or laptops yet, and our parents rarely let us buy expensive movie rentals and hotel rooms. We chose the Haunted Mansion, since it was fairly new, and we love Halloween. And boy, is that movie creepy to watch as a kid all on your own. The opening credits really set the atmosphere, and it's hard not to be sucked in by the ghosts and hell stuff when you're young. My sister ended up getting really freaked out because our parents stayed out so late and cried until they finally came back. Maybe a year later, we rewatched the movie with our mom, since we had enjoyed it when we weren't terrified, and she was shocked. "I let you watch this all by yourselves? I'm a bad mother." We laughed and assured her we'd picked it on our own, and didn't blame her at all. Had we watched anything else and gotten tired and gone to bed, the night would have been completely eventless. Similarly, a couple years later, my sister and I watched When Good Ghouls Go Bad with Christopher Lloyd. It was late and our parents were out somewhere. No, they were not absentee parents, we just had a bad habit of choosing scary movies on those few evenings we were on our own. We knew basically nothing about the movie and ended up getting completely sucked into the story. A town curse, an open crypt, a demon statue, zombies. Around 2/3 in, our dad came home to find us terrified out of our wits. He sat on the couch with us and tried not to chuckle as we screamed during the film's big reveal scene. Rewatching it now, that movie is fairly predictable, but the atmosphere is still fantastic. I mean, a kid dies being baked in a kiln. That is horrifying. Oh, and a bat got in the house while we were watching Spirited Away for the first time. I think it showed up during the freakiest no-face scenes, so we were really freaked out. And you'll be happy to hear that our parents were home that time, so Dad was able to shoo the bat out the back door. And Edward Scissorhands scares the crap out of me. And The Sixth Sense is a good way to make your friends cry. I also recommend Transylvania 65000, Castlevania, Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase, What We Do in the Shadows, Trick or Treat, Ghostbusters, Scream, and Beetlejuice. Maybe not the newer Ghostbusters because the humor shoots itself in the foot repeatedly. Anyway, I think this book is a special gift for anyone who loves Halloween, or who feels like the other in their family or society. I recently watched a video essay by Matt Baum going over the queer coding of Disney villains and how gay audiences often identify more with the flamboyant bad guy than the conventional hero. I found myself thinking about metaphorical representations of queerness and otherness while reading From the Dust Returned. The family could be an allegory for any group of people who are misunderstood by the world at large, especially since the story takes place against the backdrop of World War II, with shadow people like the ghastly passenger fleeing to the west as a senseless war spreads and modern life makes both hiding and quiet contemplation harder. The family represents the plight of the Jews, the gays, the unwanted. In a modern world where people don't believe as much in powers above or below, can they believe in evil like the Nazis that threatens to sweep everything away? I also find myself thinking about my favorite musical, Were the World Mine. It is a modern take on William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, with the text from the play being converted into surreal musical sequences. The movie plays with the idea of fairies and magic as a gay teenager, also named Timothy, suddenly finds a spell that turns people into homosexuals. Frustrated, bullied, and largely alone, Timothy decides to show his tormentors what it's like to walk in his shoes. He becomes the wicked fairy Puck, sure he is right and struggling to accept that he is misusing the love spell. The song I think of most comes from the climax of the film.
Over hill, over dale, thorough bush, thorough briar, over park, over pale, thorough flood, thorough fire.
What have we done? We have mistaken quite, and laid the love juice on some true love side. Thieves of love, we've come by night, and stolen lovers' hearts away in spite. The will of man is by your reason swayed with such force and blessed power. With all goodwill, with all my heart, all things shall be peace.
far blameless proves my enterprise, that I have anointed those poor souls' eyes. And so far am I glad it so did sort, as this their jangling I esteem a sport.
The will of man is by your reason swayed, with such force and blessed power, with all goodwill, with all my heart, all things shall be peace.
We fairies that do roam from the presence of the sun, we follow darkness like a breeze,
Thou wast wont to see, as thou wast wont to be. See as thou wast wont to see, as thou wast wont to be. See as thou wast wont to see, as thou wast wont to be. See as thou wast wont to see.
We fairies that do run from the presence of the sun, we follow darkness like a dream. Reading more of the original section, Puck said, "Now it is the time of night, that the graves all gaping wide, everyone lets forth his sprite in the churchway paths to glide." What I am trying to get at is that for some people, the family living in the October house will be nothing more than a spooky Halloween story, while for others it is a deeply personal allegory. Timothy lives with his family that loves him, but his differences are undeniable. You could read this as being gay, being transgender, being a different religion, being adopted, being mixed race, being an artist, anything that speaks to you. And the family lives in a world that is one way, while they are very much another. Their foods and rituals scare their neighbors, like immigrants who fled to America to escape faraway wars and made a home for themselves. They feel that their way of life, or afterlife, is fading away as they struggle to keep up with a changing, modernizing world. Returning to John the Unjust, the Dracula of the family, his brief appearance supports my queer reading of the text. Again referring to Matt Baum's video essays, this time on the drag queen Divine, the inclusion of Vlad the Impaler makes a clear point that the family is aware of how unusual they are, how afraid the world is of them, but how they are safe in their otherness and don't look to harm the world. They flee from war like anyone else. John, on the other hand, actively causes harm and even threatens to tell everyone about the family if they don't do as he says. In a lot of queer media, like films by John Waters, calling the police is the ultimate betrayal to the community. To do so is to cross an invisible line that separates one group from those who would oppress them. Though at first glance Timothy is the most unusual member of the family, it is actually John who does not belong. Timothy is sad and lonely sometimes, but John is a hypocrite. As Caesar A. Cruz once said, "Art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable." Which camp do you fall into today? Thanks for joining me for this very special, very late Halloween episode. We covered a book by Ray Bradbury like I promised forever ago, and I got to talk about some fun stuff. Go watch Were the World Mine right now and pick up a copy of The Dark Angel. Were you hoping I'd cover a different one of Bradbury's books? Let me know in the YouTube comments which one you would have preferred or think I really need to talk about later on. Like the video, subscribe, ring the bell, etc. Until next time, happy Pride Month, Earthlings!